So I'm hopeful the members of the Standing Committee are in the room and can take their seat. I'm mindful that we are stopping an hour early due to the transit situation, so I really do hope to get started. Thank you. I appreciate everyone taking your seats. I believe I now have my quorum, so I will invite the Standing Committee members to settle in, and we will turn our attention to Doc 45. Thank you, everyone. So I appreciate I have my quorum, and so I will begin. The next item on our agenda for this evening session is document 45 on transport. This document was prepared by the Secretariat, and I will invite the Secretariat to present their document.
Thank you very much, Chair. Yeah, I'm speaking to document SC74, document 45. I'd like to first recall that Resolution Conf 10.21 Rep Conf 16 on transport of live specimen in paragraph 2E recommends that the Standing Committee and the Secretariat, in consultation with the Animals and Plants Committee and the International Air Transport Association, also known as IATA, regularly review, revise, and approve amendments to the CITES guidelines for the non-air transport of live wild animals and plants. The current version of these guidelines has been in place since COP16 in 2013 and has not been revised since then. To correct this, and in line with the mandate in the resolution, the Secretariat is pleased to present a revision of the guidelines for approval by the Standing Committee at this meeting. This revision has been prepared in close consultation with IATA Live Animals and Perishables Board and has been circulated for comments to the Animals Committee and through a notification to the parties in November last year. The review and revision of the guidelines should be done regularly. This version of the guidelines is a much needed update on the current version, but the document should be further revised in the future. It's a living document. In this context, the Secretariat would like to recall that the committee on Monday agreed to present amendments to the resolution on transport of live specimens to further revise the guidelines to mitigate risks to animals and human health posed by international trade in CITES listed species. However, this should not prevent the committee from endorsing this version at this meeting. In conclusion, the CITES Secretariat invites the committee to review and approve the CITES guidelines contained in the annex to the present document. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Secretariat. So we are now looking at SC74, Doc 45, and the Standing Committee is invited to review and approve the update to the CITES guidelines for non-air transport of live animals found in the annex of the document, and noting, of course, that this is a living document and there will be further reviews in due course. So I open the floor for comments starting with members of the Standing Committee. Canada, please, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Canada thanks the Secretariat for diligently working on the much-needed update to the CITES guidelines for the non-air transport of live wild animals and plants. We are also thankful for the help and guidance provided by IATA, as well as the contributions by the members of the AC and PC committees, and the comments provided by parties and organizations to notification 2021-070, sent out in November 2021. Canada appreciates the amendments and supports the recommendation to approve these new guidelines. We would like to raise our concern with references to IATA live animal regulations and perishable cargo regulations in the guidelines. We are also concerned when references are made to IATA regulations as a condition for CITES permits for export of live animals and plants. As mentioned by the U.S. in their intervention on SC 74 Doc 16, the IATA regulations are not readily accessible to the public. The documents are expensive, $300 a document, and are updated annually. It creates a barrier for CITES authorities as well as border officials. We recommend that an accessible solution with targeted access to the key elements needed for compliance in transport of live CITES species to be made available to ensure broad adherence to the requirements. We suggest 3 potential options, which we would be happy to discuss and pursue with IATA and the Secretariat. Option 1, the CITES guidelines for the non-air transport of live wild animals and plants is presently accessible on the CITES website. Those guidelines could be modified to remove references to IATA, incorporating instead directly into the guidelines the requirements for the preparation and transport of live animals and plants protected under CITES, making the guidelines applicable to all forms of transport, air and non-air. Option 2, include information on the preparation and transport of live animals and plants into the CITES checklist. The CITES identification material is now available in the checklist. The checklist could also be enhanced to include live animal and plant transport information. It would be very easy to search and find relevant information for a species being transported using the searching function in the checklist. And option number 3, discuss with IATA methods to readily access the specific information required for the preparation and transport of species through some online portal or downloadable document free of charge for users. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Canada. So my understanding is you support the updates to the guidelines for non-air transport as found in the annex. And Canada additionally identifies a concern with the accessibility of the IATA guidelines and provides some considerations for future work to see if this issue can be addressed in some way. So I'll continue to take remarks and views on the decision, and then I will see about our path forward. So I will continue to take comments from members of the Standing Committee, and I will also offer the floor to parties who wish to comment. I see Switzerland.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to thank the Secretariat and the Live Animals and Perishable Board for updating the guidelines. I think it's very timely and it's needed. Timely also because we will be having a stronger collaboration with the OIE, and I think this update was much needed. I would also like to join Canada in issuing some concerns about the accessibility of these guidelines. We are asking parties to use the guidelines, but they are, as was mentioned by Canada, quite expensive and not so accessible. So the concerns and the proposals that Canada made are quite helpful in moving that forward. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Switzerland. I will continue to take comments from parties, Standing Committee members. United States, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The United States fully supports the changes presented in the revision of the CITES guidelines for the non-air transport of live animals and plants. The United States is a member of the IATA Animal Advisory Board and was closely involved with the revision of these guidelines in collaboration with CITES at several meetings during the year. The guidelines are intended to address transport conditions for some specimens of CITES-listed species that may require different or additional transport methods for long-distance ground journeys, and we note that all air transport requires some portion of transport by ground. While further updates may be considered during the next intercessional period in accordance with the recommendations provided in SC 74 Document 16, Role of CITES in Reducing Risk of Future Zoonotic Disease Emergence, we do not think this should detract from supporting the useful updates presented in this document. We also agree with Canada and would be interested in pursuing options with IATA for more readily making the IATA live animal regulations and perishable cargo regulations available to CITES authorities. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, United States. I have Belgium.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We would also support the previous speakers in thanking the Secretariat and also sharing the concerns of Canada. Thank you.
Thank you, Belgium. I'm hearing support, and I'm hearing the echoing of the concerns regarding the accessibility of the IATA guidelines, such that perhaps the committee would like to charge the Secretariat to work in consultation with IATA and taking into account some of the proposals provided by Canada, and perhaps provide us with a report on those at SC 77, as I believe this could fall under the work that they are charged to do on transport. So this is where my thoughts are going based on what I've heard. I will continue to take interventions from parties. I'll also invite any observer organizations who might wish to intervene to raise their flag. Eurogroup for Animals.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I'd like to echo the previous parties as well on the accessibility issues. And this intervention is supported by 11 observer organizations and has been submitted to the Secretariat. We thank the Secretariat for these guidelines, for recognizing that ResConf 10.21 requires the regular review, and we thank them for undertaking that review, given that no other mechanism is currently available, and for providing parties and organizations with the opportunity, albeit limited, to provide input on the guidelines. Madam Chair, we recommend that the committee forward the guidelines to COP19 with a recommendation to approve them alongside a draft declaration to establish a transparent and inclusive process for a further comprehensive time-bound review that will enable input from parties, observers, and relevant experts, and make recommendations to the Animal Committee, Standing Committee, and COP20. Additionally, constitute a joint Animals and Plant Committee Transport Working Group with a mandate to manage the regular review of guidelines and to develop amendments on ResConf 10.21, RevCop 16, to improve detailed transport requirements, clarifying responsibilities for compliance to the review, to review their implementation by parties. And lastly, we recommend that ResConf 10.21 be amended to state that air transport is the preferred mode of transport for live animals for journeys that by other means would be longer than 24 hours. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you, Eurogroup for Animals. We take note of the recommendations you have provided. I will do a last sweep for interest in intervening on document 45 on transport of live specimens from parties or observer organizations. Okay. So seeing no requests for the floor, it's my conclusion that the Standing Committee agrees and approves the amendments proposed to the CITES guidelines for non-air transport as provided in the annex to SC 74 Doc 45. Additionally, the Standing Committee requests the Secretariat to consider, in consultation with IATA and taking into account the intervention from Canada, options to improve the accessibility of the IATA air transport guidelines and provide a report to the Standing Committee at its 77th meeting. Okay, so seeing no requests for the floor, I take that to be the conclusions of the Standing Committee on document 45, and I can turn our attention now to document 42. So this is on authentication and control of permits, and it's a report of the Secretariat. So Secretariat, please, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The document presents the summary of an in-depth study on permit authentication and control, which was conducted by the Secretariat with generous support from Switzerland, and as indicated in the decisions 18.130 and 18.131. A total of 17 parties from all 6 CITES regions were included in the study. By mistake, Singapore was omitted from the list of parties in paragraph 6. The study was organized around 4 broad areas: permit issuance, border control, reporting, and inter-country permit data exchange. An important consideration for the study was to review the practices of parties that has instituted automated online permit application systems and the practices of those that had not yet done so. Some of the issues and the findings of the study were also covered by the mandate of the Working Group on Electronic Systems and Information Technology. The Secretariat therefore presented the findings to the Working Group for its discussion. In the report under item 41, the Working Group will be presenting a number of recommendations that follow from the study. Based on the findings of the study, the Secretariat invites the Standing Committee to consider the following recommendations. First, to encourage parties to review the controls of authorized e-commerce in specimens of CITES-listed species. Second, the Standing Committee is also invited to propose to COP19 the amendments contained in paragraph 30 on coordination and collaboration between agencies engaged in CITES border enforcement for inclusion in Resolution Conf 11.3 Rev COP 18. The study finds that although 14 out of 17 parties have multiple agencies engaged in CITES border enforcement, only 5 parties have established a formal multi-agency body to exchange information and coordinate enforcement activities. Third, the Standing Committee is further invited to propose to COP19 the draft decisions contained in paragraph 43 about the possible work with the World Customs Organization related to improving risk management, including development of clear policies on physical inspection. The study finds that the most parties do not physically inspect every CITES export or import. It further notes the importance of the endorsement of the export permits or re-export certificates. Finally, the Standing Committee is invited to agree that decisions 18.130 and 131 have been implemented and can be proposed for deletion by the Conference of the Parties. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Secretariat. So the Standing Committee can turn its attention to Doc 42 and the recommendations found in paragraph 50 of the document, including proposed amendments to Resolution COF 11.3 found in paragraph 30 and some proposed decisions found in paragraph 43. So I open the floor for comments from the Standing Committee on the recommendations found in paragraph 50 of document 42. Belgium, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We support all developments in the digitalization of CITES processes, notably in e-permitting, and we would encourage the use of the CITES Species Plus application programming interface, API in short, as it enables up-to-date taxonomy and CITES listings. With regards to the recommendations in paragraph 50, We would support the recommendation C on the establishment of formal multi-agency bodies, the recommendation D on the risk assessment policies for control and shipments, and the last recommendation E on the deletion of implemented decisions. We do, however, would appreciate some guidance on the recommendation B related to e-commerce, because it's not really clear what kind of special provisions should be taken by the parties in relation to this trade, or what kind of review should be envisaged. So we feel that this recommendation is a bit unclear. On the one hand, it seems to imply that maybe there should be like some simplified procedures for e-commerce, but on the other hand, we have several documents highlighting the problem of illegal trade via the internet, so it's not quite clear what was meant by this, so we would appreciate your guidance on this. Thank you.
Perhaps I'll invite the Secretariat to respond to your question, as if they are suggesting this recommendation. They could clarify their intentions here, perhaps. Secretariat, please.
Thank you very much. It was, following from this study, it was clear that parties generally do not have specific regulations of e-commerce related to CITES listed species. And the idea was to verify or to ensure that general legislation would also apply to electronic commerce of cited listed specimens. It was definitely not to propose a simplified procedure, rather the contrary. And it does overlap a little bit with the recommendations that we made in the context of domestic markets of frequently illegally traded specimens yesterday, where we also said make sure that you have legislation that regulates trade in cited listed specimens when it's happening online. So that's all, and since it was overlapping with other decisions, we didn't really want to go into more detail here. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretariat. And so my understanding then, the intent of recommendation B in encouraging parties to review the controls is really to encourage parties to ensure that they have suitable controls of e-commerce to ensure that the requirements of the CITES are met. So with that clarification, and we can ensure that that clarification is in the final results of the Standing Committee. That seems to have been helpful for our colleagues from Belgium. China, please.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Madam Chair. China supports in principle the Secretariat's report, and we think that the application of advanced technology is beneficial for exports and imports. But we must also underline that every party has its own context in terms of socio-economic situations and so forth, and the trade model in terms of CITES. So there are varied and different practices between different parties. So it's important to respect the way in which the convention is applied by each party in the face of its national context. Thank you.
Thank you, China. We take note of your comments. I will continue to take interventions from Standing Committee members, and I'll also invite interventions from observer parties. Senegal, did you wish to take the floor? Followed by Canada.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We congratulate the Secretariat on the work that has been carried out, but I would tend to go along the same lines as China in recalling that often it's not a matter of suitable policies, but we have to review our national text. It's a process that is maybe difficult to understand, but it's not easy. If I take Senegal's codes, we have permits that are under that code, but until we have another law that covers these provisions. I'm not a lawyer. I think maybe Juan won't contradict me there. We can't just change like that. The law sets out that it's in this way. So, but we can't do anything about it if it's there. We might want to do it. Sometimes it's a matter of equipment for our services. These are maybe things that don't seem that important. Yes, we will be moving towards the technologies that will eliminate a lot of issues and make our services more reliable.
Thank you, Senegal, and thank you for your comments. And I think the encouragement on that review is to undertake the exact kind of work that you're emphasizing, and to see how what would be pertinent for your country in order to ensure the implementation of CITES. So thank you very much, Senegal. I had Canada, and I will follow Canada by Brazil. Canada, please.
Thank you, Chair. Canada thanks the Secretariat for initiating this study and presenting the results. We thank the parties that contributed to the study. The study raised some areas of concern that CITES parties need to work together to find effective solutions to improve the implementation of CITES and its trade controls. Canada supports the recommendations in paragraph 50A, noting the information on the study presented in the document. Canada generally supports the proposed amendments to Resolution Conf 11.3, Rev Cop 18, provided in paragraph 30. However, we do not support the text in VI, or the little Roman VI, relating to the training of professionals involved in wildlife trade and management. We believe it is outside the scope of the changes proposed. Canada supports the proposed decisions 19BB and CC. We do not fully understand the intention of decision 19AA and suggest the following language for added clarity and to focus the efforts of parties to trade of concern to them. So I will go very slowly. 19AA, directed to the parties. Where this has not yet been done, parties are encouraged to undertake risk assessments, to develop risk profiles specific to CITES listed specimens, frequently, and here we would strike out found in trade, and replace that with exported or imported by the party, comma, and to reach out, finishing off the decision as it is. So replacing found in trade with exported or imported by the party. Does that make sense? Great. And finally, Canada supports the recommendation to delete decisions 18.130 and 131 as these have been completed. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Canada. And for your first point, you would suggest striking paragraph Roman VI in the proposed amendments to Resolution Conf 11.3. So thank you for that point. I will continue to take comments and views, including on the proposal by Canada. I have Brazil, followed by the United States. Brazil, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair, for giving me the floor. We wouldn't have a problem with Canada's amendment. We also have some suggestions to 19BB. Since 2006, Brazil has been implementing several electronic systems to better control the licensing process of issuing permits to access and manage the sustainable use of our natural resources, both in flora and fauna. Since 2019, the federal government has been operating a program aiming at the digital transformation of public services, in which the Ministry of the Environment started projects for technological updating of present informational systems and the development of new tools and mechanisms to improve compliance, environmental control, and data monitoring. In January 2022, we launched the Pau Brasil platform that integrates datasets and information between natural resources controlling systems, CITES permit issuing system and the Foreign Trade and Border Control System, allowing better performance on risk management and inspections procedures. Based on that experience, we suggest the inclusion in the recommendations of paragraph 43 of document 42 of the development of a specific guidance for risk-based analysis related to the process of analysis and inspections under the CITES permit issuing system, in line with the conclusions of paragraph 41 of the same document.
So it sounds to me like you're suggesting an addition. So I would appreciate if you could read the language of what you're suggesting in much slower pace.
Sure. As Brazilians, we tend not to be very direct. So. The idea would be to include, after guidance and elements, including a specific guidance for risk-based analysis related to the process of analysis and inspections under CITES permit issuing system.
So I appreciate that. I think I've caught it, but I wouldn't hurt to hear it one more time.
All right.
A little bit slower.
A specific guidance for risk-based analysis related to the process of analysis and inspections under CITES permit issuing system.
So you would insert that after it's sort of develop guidance and elements?
Including?
After guidance, I would think it would
Yes,
fit.
I think it would make
And
more
then we would
sense.
continue with and elements.
Yes.
Okay. And the type of guidance is specific guidance for a risk-based analysis related to the process of analysis and inspection under the CITES permit issuance system.
Yes.
Okay. I hope people manage to catch the intent of that, and I will continue to look for comments. So that's an amendment to 19BB. So next on my list was the United States, please.
Thank you, Chair. The United States has no further comments on Canada's suggestion or Brazil's for those sections. However, we would like to recommend regarding the proposed amendments outlined in paragraph 30 for the inclusion in Resolution Conf 11.3, Rev Cop 18, on compliance and enforcement in a possible new section on national coordination with the following edits. We submitted the edits to the committee. I'm just going to read what it would sound like at the end, if that's okay. Do we put them as an INF document? As an INF document, yes.
Can you, sorry, you said the edits you're about to read out, you also provided for as an INF doc. Can you just remind us the INF number? Oh, no, that's not the case. Sorry.
We'll follow up with that if it's okay with you.
Okay. So if you, please do let us know your edits, just not too quickly, because I'm not sure we have them to hand. So thank you. United States.
XX recommends that parties, and the addition is where possible and appropriate. The following edit would be in little I, deleting where possible and appropriate. And it would read, exchange information on seizures between customs and the CITES authorities. And the next edit suggestion would be little I, allow custom systems access to and include information in, and it will continue with permitting databases of management authorities with the addition of, and allow management authorities access to information in customs systems. So I could read that last one. Allow customs systems access to information in permitting databases of management authorities, and allow management authorities access to information in customs systems. Thank you.
Wasn't too much. Thank you. So the United States is proposing amendments to, in paragraph 30, the proposed additions to Resolution Conf 11.3 in Roman i to delete where possible and appropriate, and in Roman III, some precisions on information in permitting databases, and then also and allow management authorities access to information in customs systems. So this is advice being provided on national coordination. So I will continue to take views from those present. I do not have any other parties on my list at this time. If another party wishes to intervene, to please raise your flag. I've heard some amendments. They seem to be in the same vein as what was intended here, so I am presuming agreement with the amendments proposed by Canada, Brazil, the United States, and of course the clarification as requested by Belgium. So this is where I'm seeing us leading, so if you have concerns, do raise your flags. I will also, at this point, offer opportunities for one or two organizations if you wish to comment. So I open the floor if you wish to comment. I see the one in the back. WWF, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We must express some disappointment at the loss of paragraph Roman 6 in the suggested amendments to Resolution Conf 11.3 Rev COP 18. This is an issue that we have looked into. It's the role of professional accreditation bodies, both through their training and through their ongoing accreditation. We've discussed this with professionals particularly in the veterinarian profession, where in the past some veterinarians have been implicated in illegal activity. And it shouldn't have been a controversial amendment to include, so we are rather disappointed that it's being lost sight of. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Thank you, WWF. So that was the amendment proposed by Canada to strike Roman VI. Okay, so as I mentioned, it was my inclination to accept the various amendments provided by the parties who spoke on this matter. I will see again if there's any concerns with any of those amendments. Switzerland, please.
Thank you, Chair. It always takes a bit time to get ready. From my experience, we are a management authority which is based within veterinary offices, within the National Veterinary Office, and veterinary offices also perform some controls on CITES specimens. And I think that veterinarians at the borders are taught and made aware of what CITES is and what the obligations on the CITES are. I think this is an important thing to do, because these are the people that often are at the borders and can see things when they do veterinary controls, be it at the borders or within the country. So I can understand that the input from WWF that this VI may be not good to strike it. So in my view, from my experience, I would keep it in. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Switzerland. Maybe I could revert to Canada to better understand your concern with VI, to see if there is a middle ground. Canada, please.
Yes, Chair. Oh, I'm listening to myself. Unlike Switzerland, there's a disconnect between our Department for the Management Authority and the veterinarian, so we don't have that direct connection. We hope that they are aware of CITES, but we are far removed, so maybe if we added to the extent possible to kind of soften it up, because it sounds pretty hard when you're saying ensure.
Thank you, Canada. I think that's a reasonable compromise. I think the concern, as I understand it from Canada, is that it is not often possible to ensure all professionals involved in wildlife trade and management are appropriately trained, as much as I'm sure Canada tries. Well, I know Canada tries. So if we include to the extent possible, perhaps that will allow us to keep the point. So with that, again, I believe that it is the will of the committee to adopt the recommendations in paragraph 50, clarifying that recommendation B, in encouraging parties to review the controls of authorized e-commerce in specimens of CITES listed species, in order to ensure that they have suitable controls for this type of trade. That we agree to propose the amendments to Resolution Conf 11.3 with the amendments proposed by the United States and this final amendment by Canada, to extent possible. And we agree to advance the decisions in paragraph 43 to the Conference of the Parties with the amendments proposed by Canada and by Brazil. And then with that, we agree that the decisions have been implemented. Thank you very much for your cooperation, and we can now move to the next item on our agenda, which is item 41, Electronic Systems and Information Technologies, report of the Working Group and the Secretariat. So, Switzerland, please, I invite you to present this report.
Thank you, Chair. First, I would like to thank the members of the working group for the continuous engagement and the input, and the Secretariat for its efficient support. At the 18th meeting, the Conference of the Parties adopted decisions 18125 to 18128 on electronic systems and information technologies. The Intercessional Working Group on this matter provided an interim report to the 73rd meeting of the Standing Committee in document SC 73, Doc 18. At this meeting, the Standing Committee noted progress and already agreed on to propose a number of draft amendments to Resolution Conf 12.3 for consideration to the COP. For ease of reference, the agreed amendments are also set out in Annex 1 to the present document. Following that meeting in 21, the working group has held 2 more meetings online in late August and November to review the outcomes of the Standing Committee meeting and to continue its discussion on pending issues. The working group reviewed and discussed the relevant findings of the study on current practices in CITES permit authentication, what we have just discussed, undertaken by the Secretariat. The Secretariat's report we just looked at now in document 42. Based on the discussions at these 2 meetings, as well as consultations by email, the working group made further recommendations to amend the text of Resolution Conf 12.3. as presented in Annex 1 to the present document. These include inclusion of a new preambular paragraph referring to benefits that electronic permitting system can provide. B, inclusion of a reference to the use of 2-dimensional barcodes to reflect and accommodate the requirements of electronic permits and certificates. clarifying that the signature of the applicant on a permit is optional for a party to include. This is the box 4 on the standard CITES form, which means that the CITES permit or certificate will be rendered invalid only if a place for the signature of the applicant is included but not filled. D. Inclusion of additional paragraphs on the required security measures and mechanisms for the electronic equivalent of original paper permits and certificates. And E. Clarification of consistency of terminology. The working group also identified other issues based on the study, inter alia, based on the study undertaken by the Secretariat. These are, the working group agreed that guidance on the use of 2D barcodes could be developed and later be added to the eCites toolkit. You will find a lot of barcodes on permits today, and they are used for a variety of matters. So guidance, I think, is really needed and also warranted. The working group agreed that endorsement of permits and certificates at the point of export by the exporting party is necessary and desirable, and that this requirement should be maintained. The working group also agreed that this endorsement does not have to be physical, meaning wet stamping, and can take other forms, but did not yet agree on any guidance for this electronic digital endorsement, and suggested that possible alternatives to physical endorsement be further explored. At the request of the Animals Committee, the working group considered the recording of species nomenclature changes in electronic CITES permit systems. In particular, the available API tool that allows an automated updating of species databases in electronic system was discussed and its use recommended. UNEP WCMC provided responses to some of the questions and observations raised with regard to API and invited parties to provide any feedback on the use of the API and guidance documents in order for UNEP WCMC to improve these if needed. A number of parties had suggested that it should be explored whether the HS code could be useful for the control of trade in CITES listed species. The working group agreed that the first step would be to explore if and how parties are currently using HS codes in order to consider whether any further work on this issue would be warranted, and proposes to include this in draft decisions for the consideration of the Conference of the Parties. The CITES Electronic Permitting Toolkit in its version 2.0 provides the technical specifications and standards and describes the business processes that can assist parties in implementing their e-permitting system. The toolkit has not been updated since version 2.0 was published in 2013. As recognized in Resolution Conf 12.3, the toolkit requires updates and revisions to reflect the ongoing development of international standards. The Secretariat has, therefore, in consultation with the chair of the working group and with funding from Switzerland, initiated the revision of the CITES e-permitting toolkit. It is expected that the revised toolkit will be available for the parties before the next meeting of the COP. So the working group invites the Standing Committee to take note of the present document, propose the draft amendments to Resolution Conf 12.3 on permits and certificates contained in the annex of this document in Annex 1, and the draft decision contained in Annex 2 for the consideration of COP19, and agree that decisions 18.125 to 18.128 have been implemented, and propose to COP19 that they can be deleted. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair of the Working Group, and thank you indeed for taking on the task of leading this working group. So we are now invited to take note of the document, to agree to propose the additional draft amendments to Res Conf 12.3 noting that some of these amendments have already been agreed at SC 73. And we are invited to submit the decisions in Annex 2 to the Conference of the Parties and agree that decisions 18.125 to 128 have been completed. So I'll open the floor for comments on the proposals from the working group from the members of the Standing Committee. I'll also invite observer parties who might wish to comment. European Union, please.
Thank you, Chair. Very briefly to thank Switzerland for chairing this working group and steering this important work. And we support the recommendations of the working group. We are working in the EU to develop an electronic system for CITES permitting, and that we hope to present and launch around COP19. And this is, of course, very valuable, the work of the working group. Thank you very much.
Thank you, EU, and good to hear about your hope to launch e-system. Peru? Peru? Go ahead, please.
We support as well the recommendation. In Peru, we're in the process of setting up the electronic systems for CITES permits. Thank you.
Thank you, Peru. South Africa, please.
Thank you, Chair. South Africa would also like to thank the Switzerland for the presentation, and we do support the recommendations. South Africa is in the very last stages of finalizing their electronic permit system. We are hoping to launch in the next month, and we will take heed of the advice as provided in the document to ensure that our electronic permit system is compliant. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, South Africa, and it's good to hear all the parties who are advancing in this area. So I see good support. I have another intervention from Panama. I'll also invite observers who might wish to comment. Panama, please.
Thank you, Chair. Panama is also working in the electronic system. We are already in the trial phase, and we hope to launch very soon. Thank you.
Dominican Republic, please.
Thank you, Chair. In Dominican Republic, we have already set up our electronic system. There's still some tweaks to be made. We've had some difficulties that are being solved because obviously this is a new system. And today, the Ministry precisely authorized the online payment, which had to be done physically before, but it's now been set up. Thank you. We support this proposal.
Thank you, Dominican Republic, and thank you to the parties who have intervened. I'm hearing good support for the conclusions of the working group and agreement with the recommendations in the document. I indicated if there is an observer who wishes to intervene, I will entertain that. Okay, seeing no further requests for the floor, it is my understanding that the Standing Committee agrees with the recommendations in SC 74 Doc 41 as presented by the working group, and thus agrees to forward the amendments to Resolution Conf 12.3 as well as the proposed draft decisions, and concludes that agrees that decisions 18.125 to 1.128 have been fulfilled. So now I will turn our attention to the next document, document 43 on purpose codes. This document was submitted by Australia as chair of the working group on purpose of transaction codes. My thanks to Australia for taking on this task, and I invite you to present your report.
Thank you, Chair. Australia has been pleased to chair the Standing Committee Intercessional Working Group on purpose of transaction codes. I'd like to thank the working group members for their participation and their engagement, and thank the Secretariat for their support. The Standing Committee has been directed to re-establish this long-standing working group to focus on defining purpose of transaction codes, to encourage their consistent use and to consider whether any codes should be eliminated or added. We've also been asked to clarify the overlap between codes that describe physical locations and those that describe activities. The working group decided to focus most of its discussion on defining codes that are presently undefined. The group, through a prioritisation exercise outlined in paragraph 12 of our document, agreed to focus on defining 7 codes, which are listed in paragraph 13. The working group also addressed the comments we received from the committee at its 73rd meeting in 2021 and incorporated a number of those into the revised draft definitions. The meeting document presents in Annex 1 these draft definitions for the 7 codes which the working group has arrived at. Paragraphs 18 to 34 outline the working group's discussions in arriving at these draft definitions. While we tried to settle on a single draft definition for all codes and mostly achieved this, we were unable to reach a consensus position on the definition for Purpose Code T for commercial trade. We've therefore presented 2 options for a definition for this code. Annex 2 of the meeting document presents draft amendments to Resolution Conf 12.3 RevCop 18 to accommodate those definitions and to provide further guidance on the selection of the appropriate code, the rationale for which we discuss at paragraph 30. The meeting document also outlines other matters that have arisen during our discussions for consideration by the Standing Committee. We welcome the views of the committee, observer parties and observers on our report and recommendations. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Australia. So Australia has presented the results of the working group, and in particular, noting the definitions being proposed for the various purpose codes with 2 alternatives for Purpose Code T. And we are invited to consider this information and then consider amendments to be submitted to the Conference of the Party to Resolution Conf 12.3. So I invite the Standing Committee to provide their views on the recommendations of the working group. Standing Committee, Belgium, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. On document 43 on purpose codes, we thank the working group for the progress and we congratulate the working group chair on the tremendous progress that it has been made. We can agree with the suggested definitions in Annex 1, except for Code P, which we feel aims to create additional or stricter conditions for authorizing trade, which might not be in line with the normal treatment, notably for Appendix 2 listed species, and also imposes stricter measures for countries that have implemented Resolution 13.7 on the control of trade in personal and household effects. Although we made tremendous progress, we might need to reflect on this code, and I wonder if we can seek some guidance from the Secretariat on the legality issues with the proposed code, for example, in the correlation with authorization of trade after the import and export, and especially the linkages with Resolution 13.7 on the control of trade in personal and household effects. On the rest of the purpose codes, we can agree with the statement that Code T should be used by default unless it is clear that the transaction is non-commercial. On the 2 options for Code T, we have a preference for option 2 because it's shorter than option 1. And we support the recommendation that the chair of the working group will work with the Secretariat to see if other resolutions require changes to ensure coherence. Thank you.
Thank you, Belgium. I will continue to take interventions from Standing Committee members. I will also invite observer parties. I think I will need some guidance as there's some disagreement been expressed and there's already options as well. So I see China, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. China does not have any opposition to the definitions that are proposed in the document. In fact, we have a comment to make. Some codes for the talk about the designation for trade and others for after that, but we don't need to go beyond the legal reasons set under the convention. We have to let the scientific authorities of importing countries to have sufficient freedom of decision for this.
Thank you, China. I will continue to take interventions on this. I see the United Kingdom and the United States. United Kingdom, please.
Thank you. We'd like to congratulate the working group on the progress they've made. Noting the concerns raised by the EU, we would support these definitions going to COP19 for consideration, highlighting that discussion at COP19 may be needed on Purpose Code P personnel, particularly as relates to any subsequent trade. But we'd like this not to hinder the endorsement of the other proposed definitions. Also, on Purpose Code T, commercial, where two options are presented, we prefer option 1, as this looks to more fully describe the range of activities that should be considered as commercial. Thank you.
Thank you, United Kingdom. United States, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The United States appreciates the work of the chair of the working group, and we generally support the recommendations, including the proposed definitions and amendments found in Annex 1 and 2 of SC 74, Doc 43. With regard to the options for the proposed definition for Purpose Code T in Annex 1, we support option 1, like the UK, and oppose option 2. Option 1 is more precise, clearer to understand, and broad enough to follow the principles of the long established in other CITES contexts, including, for example, Res Conf 5.10, Rev COP 15 on definitions of primary commercial purposes. The United States follows these principles in our regulations. Option 2, on the other hand, would not follow these principles and is not broad enough because not all commercial trade involves a sale or transfer of ownership. In regards to Purpose Code N, we would welcome additional explanation and discussion to more clearly define what actions may be considered a conservation introduction outside the natural and/or historical range of a species. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, United States. I will continue to take interventions on the proposed definitions of purpose codes provided by the working group. I've opened the floor to standing committee members as well as parties. I see Senegal. Did you wish to take the floor? Followed by Canada. Senegal, please.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I appreciate the interventions and proposals that were made. However, I had reservations about what I heard from our colleague in China, that we should give more freedom to the importing country to define the code. I think CITES is a common mechanism for regulation, and it's something that we should all be part of it. Or maybe I didn't understand what he was saying, that we should let the importers define their own codes. That doesn't really fit with the convention. Thank you.
I suspect that was a misunderstanding, Senegal, and I invite you to confer if you would like, but I would keep our attention focused on the proposed definitions in this document. Canada, please, you wish to provide your views? Canada?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Canada thanks the chair of the working group as well as its members for this excellent report and results. we're happy to see progress being made in clear definitions. We echo what is reported in paragraphs 36 and 37, indicating that an adjustment period will be needed to adopt these interpretations. We also need to be mindful of the potential impact of these changes to the CITES data in the trade database. We echo the comments from Belgium, and we'd like to hear some opinions from the Secretariat on the legal ramifications of the Purpose Code P. We support the proposed definitions and subsequent amendments to CITES resolution, except for the P. And our preference is for option 2 for the Purpose Code T, as the language is simpler and easier for people to understand. Less words is better. And we support continued efforts by the chair of the working group in collaboration with the Secretariat to revise any other resolutions related to or affected by the definitions proposed for in this resolution. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Canada, I don't see any. Israel, please.
Thank you, Chair. Like others, we welcome this work that was done on the purpose of transaction codes. And in response to some of the other comments, we would like to remind parties that the purpose of code can be different for the importing and for the exporting countries. They do not have to be identical. In terms of these definitions, we would also like to point out that the definitions also appear on the actual permits as it appears in 12.3. And making changes to this text could also entail needs for changes in legislation in some countries where the actual permit appears in their legislation. So we would promote that these definitions would stay in the resolution as explanations and not necessarily appear on the permit itself. Leave the 1 or 2 word definition as it is on the permits, but have access to these more detailed explanations available in a resolution for assistance. Whether it's here or in 12.3 would probably be a better place. Specifically on the personal P, there's far too much wording here for it to appear as a short reference, and we concur with other parties that say this has to be further amendment or adjustment discussed at COP19. In terms of the commercial trade, we feel that option 1 is more closely aligned with the way we see commercial trade being enacted. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Israel. I now have Switzerland, please.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to align ourselves with the comments made from Canada. First, we would also like to thank the working group for its work and the progress made. Concerning the P personal, we really think we have to rethink what these ramifications are if we adopt such a definition. And concerning T, I also like to have a definition with fewer words. For instance, in option 1, I wouldn't know how to deal with the last sentence, use or benefit, including any activity reasonably likely to result in economic use. In practice, when I issue permits and authorize permits, that definition doesn't really help me in that determining whether it is trade or not. So the shorter one is clearer to me and better to be applied. Thank you.
Thank you, Switzerland. I don't see any more requests from parties, and I was wondering if the Secretariat wished to react to the questions posed by Belgium.
Thank you, Chair. And first, let me congratulate the Chair for the excellent work and the working group for all the progress, building upon incremental progress from past intercessional periods. So congratulations to all. And on this issue of the Code P, we agree that these purpose codes are to regulate international trade. What happens after, you will be invited to be cautious on don't regulate too much beyond the scope of the convention, and perhaps we invite you to use the definition of chain of custody in resolution 18.7, which is documentation required to verify the legality of the specimens, that has some safeguards on what is feasible and applicable there, to don't go beyond the scope of the treaty. Having said this, as a general comment, the aim of the purpose codes is not to create additional or stricter conditions for authorizing trade, but to clarify the meaning of the intention of the code by using these codes. Perhaps the code P will need further refinement, and totally agree with Canada that less words is better than a two-word definition. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Secretariat. And so, from what I understand, the Secretariat is providing a caution on language within a purpose code that goes, that provides guidance or indications on regulation beyond the import-export regulation that's under the CITES mandate. So first of all, what I'm hearing is I didn't hear any concerns. Oh, I've lost my annex. Okay. I didn't hear any concerns with, or significant concerns with the definitions for the other codes. The questions seem to be around P and T. So perhaps the Standing Committee might wish to transmit the proposed amendments to 12.3 for the other codes, so include the definitions for zoo, medical, ME, and et cetera, but in report that they prepared a possible description definition for personal, as well as the two options for commercial, and invite further considerations of those. I think it's a bit challenging to put them into the proposed amendments to the resolution either as alts for code T, or, and just because I'm hearing a lot of comments and questions around the code P, it's maybe not ready to actually propose as an amendment. So but I'm taking into account UK's point about not losing the work on the others. So my suggestion might be for the Standing Committee to advance those amendments that seem generally agreeable, and then in addition report on code T and code P. Invite further conversation perhaps at the conference of the parties, and if not, we could continue having the conference of the discussion after. So we could either invite further discussion at the conference of the parties, or simply suggest a decision to continue discussion on those two pieces. And perhaps what I can do in line with recommendation C, with the chair of the working group working with the Secretariat to identify those relevant cross-references for those aspects that were agreeable, the non-P, non-T codes. They could also consider whether there should be a decision to invite further conversation on the P and T directed to the Standing Committee. Does that sound like a way forward? Okay, so I'll take that to be the conclusions of the Standing Committee. So the Standing Committee will transmit the amendments to proposed in the annex to Resolution Conf 12.3, with the exception of the proposed additions on Purpose Code T and Purpose Code P. The Standing Committee will also transmit a report of the discussions on these codes, including in particular the discussion around Code P and Code T, in order to invite further consideration of these, and we could do so in the form of a draft decision directed to the Standing Committee to continue discussion on appropriate definitions of Code P and Code T. And then we will invite the chair of the working group to work with the Secretariat to consider any relevant cross-references that might need to be drawn to the attention of the Conference of the Parties. Thank you very much for your hard work, Australia and members of the working group. With that, I think we can turn our attention now to document 40, guidance on making legal acquisition findings. Are we skipping 44? Oh, my bad. 44, simplified procedures for permits and certificates. You can see I'm in a rush. Okay, so document 44 was prepared by Australia as well, based on a request the Standing Committee Chair and Secretariat received from the Organization for Animal Health. So Australia, I would welcome you to introduce your document, please.
Thank you, Chair. Australia is pleased to present this paper to the Standing Committee for consideration. We would like to thank the World Organization for Animal Health for their engagement in developing the paper and thank the Secretariat for their support. Historical issues facilitating the movement of forensic and biological samples for diagnostic, scientific and forensic research purposes, have impeded vital research to manage and protect species. To address these issues, at the 69th meeting of the Standing Committee, Australia submitted an information paper to explore options to better facilitate movement of these samples to achieve improved conservation outcomes. From this, the Working Group on Simplified Procedures for Permits and Certificates, chaired by Australia, was created. The Working Group then introduced amendments to Resolution Conf 11.15 on non-commercial loan, donation or exchange of museum and herbarium specimens, and Resolution Conf 12.3 on permits and certificates adopted at the 18th Conference of the Parties. Though the amendments adopted at COP18 address some of the issues related to the movement of forensic and biological samples, in particular by encouraging the faster processing of permits, they did not resolve them all, as noted by the Working Group at the time. In 2021, the World Organization for Animal Health contacted the CITES Secretariat proposing further exploring simplified CITES requirements for transportation of wildlife diagnostic specimens and outlined in the current document. As previous chair on the Working Group on Simplified Procedures for Permits and Certificates, Australia agreed to present this matter to the Standing Committee for consideration. We welcome the views of the committee, observer parties and observers. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Australia, for bringing this forward. And in the document, the committee is invited to consider the issues raised, and if deemed appropriate, submit a decision to the Conference of the Party for the Standing Committee to consider the need for the development of a further appropriate mechanism to facilitate the efficient international movement of wildlife samples. So I would invite the views of the Standing Committee. I'm also Standing Committee. If agreeable to you, I can also ask the representative from the OIE, who I believe is present, if they wish to present their concerns, and then we can begin our debate, if that's agreeable to the members of the Standing Committee. Okay, so representative from the OIE, if you're present, if you could provide your views. Thank you, please. You have the floor.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So I would like to support strongly this decision recommendation. It's a big issue, the transport of diagnostic specimen in wildlife. And we have many cases, and the most famous is the Saiga antelope, where to send the sample, it took 6 months, which was really difficult to have a diagnosis and to take the control measures that are needed to control the disease. So it will be my last word. It's very important to facilitate the transport of diagnostic specimen in wildlife. Thank you.
Thank you, OIE. So now I will revert to taking the views of the members of the Standing Committee. I saw, I believe, Canada, followed by China. Canada, please.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Canada would like to thank Australia for having taken on this challenge. This analysis of the situation shows us the challenges that are involved in the movement of scientific specimens of wildlife. The pandemic has shown us the issues that arise, and so we must ensure that we don't put up barriers in times of urgency. But we do need to maintain our problems, but the mechanisms that allow this exchange and permit the necessary flexibility should be explored. We recognize that participation, that wildlife health can contribute to ensuring that we have efficient mechanisms developed when it comes to health and conservation matters. It's important to understand that exemptions for scientific samples are important. Simplified procedures can be used to improve the efficiency of the authorization of trade of scientific samples. Having clear and simple guidelines is very important when we face these situations, and it could also help us to prepare for rapid reactions when situations arise. Canada would suggest a minor amendment to the document directed to the Standing Committee. The Standing Committee should look at the issue of knowing if it's necessary to develop new mechanisms aiming at facilitating the efficient movement of samples of wildlife. And here we'd add tags or for conservation, comma, for examination, for consideration by the 18th Conference of the Parties. Thank you.
Une autre fois? OK. Je ne vais pas tout le relire. Le comité permanent étudie la question de savoir...
The Standing Committee should examine whether it's necessary to have new mechanisms in order to facilitate the efficient international movement of samples of wildlife for diagnostic purposes or for conservation, we add that, comma, to be for the consideration of the 20th Conference of the Parties.
C'est bon? Merci.
Thank you.
Thank you, Canada. So if I understood you correctly, after in the English version, diagnostic purposes, you would add for conservation or to facilitate conservation. Thank you. So I will continue to take interventions on the document 44 and the proposed decision. United States, followed by Argentina. United States, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The United States currently implements the scientific exchange exemption consistent with Resolution Conf 11.15 Revs COP 18 and the simplified permits procedures consistent with Resolution Conf 12.3 Rev COP 18. And we encourage other parties to use the guidance document endorsed at Standing Committee 73 for implementation of these different procedures. As well, the United States is happy to share with other parties who might be interested in talking with us about it, sharing our procedures that we use. We support the presentation of the issues raised in Standing Committee 74 Doc 44 to COP 19 for discussion, which may include the involvement of the wildlife health community, with the important clarification that the exemption and simplified procedures are two different issues. The simplified procedures may be utilized to help improve efficiency for permitting trade in diagnostic specimens, while the scientific exchange exemption cannot. We emphasize that additional discussion should not lead to duplicating and revisiting the exhaustive discussions held during the last intercessional period, in particular with regard to the implementation of the non-commercial scientific exchange exemption. We agree with the conclusions reached at COP 18 that removing the need for the samples to be exchanged, loaned, or donated by registered institutions would be in contravention of the convention. And we do not see a need to revisit Resolution Conf 11.15 Rev COP 18 at this time. Rather, parties should be encouraged to register qualifying World Organization for Animal Health official reference laboratories where appropriate in accordance with Resolution Conf 11.15 Rev COP 18. We believe that further efforts would be best focused on identifying any gaps in the new guidance and any capacity building that may be needed to assist the parties in their utilization of simplified procedures to issue permits and certificates in accordance with the recommendations in Resolution Conf 12.3 Rev COP 18. Also, we'd like to recommend some additions to the decision. We agree with the amendments already suggested by Canada, but we would also like to add, after mechanisms, including guidance and capacity building on simplified procedures in accordance with the recommendations in Resolution Conf 12.3 Rev COP 18 Part 13. Thank you, Madam Chair.
United States, can you read that
Yes.
addition again slowly, please?
Yes, it's right after mechanisms. And it's including guidance and capacity building on simplified procedures in accordance with the recommendations in Resolution Conf 12.3 Rev COP 18 Part XIII.
Thank you, United States. So the United States would amend the decision to read, the Standing Committee shall consider the need for the development of further appropriate mechanisms, including guidance and capacity building on simplified procedures in accordance with the recommendations in Res Conf 12.3, Rev Cop 18, Part XIII. Okay. Thank you, United States. United Kingdom, please, you have the floor.
Thank you. Hearing what's been said so far in this discussion, it does feel like there might that further work is needed to identify potential means to address the remaining issues relating to diagnostic samples and explore options for further facilitating the movement of these samples. And so we support the draft decision being put to COP19 and working with other parties to seek solutions on this issue. And we're happy with the amendments proposed by Canada and the US.
Thank you, United Kingdom. And with my apologies, Argentina, please, you have the floor.
Gracias, señora presidenta.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We wanted to thank and congratulate Australia and the working group for the document that we support. We're in agreement with the amendment proposals from Canada and the United States, and we would just add in the recommendation directed at to the Standing Committee, we would say after wildlife samples for diagnostic purposes, instead of and conservation, we'd say and or conservation. Thank you.
So you would add after wildlife samples for diagnostic purposes and or conservation purposes. Okay. Oh, okay. And I will see if there's any further comments on the proposed decision in SC 74 Doc 44. I will see if there's comments from members of the Standing Committee or observer parties, and if there is an observer who wishes to comment, I will take a short 2 comments. IUCN and WCS. So IUCN, please, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. This intervention is on behalf of IUCN, the World Organization for Animal Health, and the WWF. We'd like to thank Australia and the working group for their attention to this issue. Both the IUCN Wildlife Health Specialist Group and the World Organization for Animal Health continue to receive reports of delays and impediments to disease investigation where CITES permits are necessary. There is also a growing reluctance of scientists and institutions to engage in the laborious process to obtain CITES permits. Of particular concern are the CITES permit requirements for use of simplified procedures for the transfer of emergency diagnostic samples from Appendix 1 listed species. We therefore support the draft decision for COP19. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, IUCN, and I will take the final intervention from WCS. WCS, please, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. This intervention, get the headphones on. This intervention, I'm loud enough without it. This intervention is on behalf of WCS, AZA, IAZA, San Diego Zoo Wildlife Alliance, WAZA, and ZSL, Alphabet Soup. We thank Australia for this document, which we appreciate. As scientific and zoological organizations that also analyze wildlife diagnostic samples from a pathogen and disease perspective and work on wildlife health in our zoos and aquaria and across the globe, we agree it is important for CITES parties to discuss and potentially adopt further mechanisms to expedite international movement of these samples. We appreciate Resolution Conf 1115 Rev, but we agree further efforts are needed, and we would be pleased to share our experiences and recommendations with any parties. We support the recommendations from Australia and appreciate the additional text from Canada, the US, supported by others, adding conservation purposes. However, we hope that progress could be made that enables adoption of a decision at COP19 without waiting for COP20, also considering the long time between COP meetings and the time-sensitive nature of this issue. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, WCS. So thank you, parties. Oh, United States, please. You have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We would just like to get clarification on some of the suggested edits to the draft decision. It sounded to us like Canada was saying diagnostic purposes for conservation, and Argentina was saying diagnostic purposes and/or conservation, which I just wanted to see if I'm hearing that correctly. Thank you.
Thank you, United States. So perhaps Canada, I will turn back to you to clarify the insertion you wish to make, and including like how it's contextualized, please.
Yeah, it was an or, so diagnostic or conservation purposes, and I believe my colleague, whose name I forgot, was saying and or.
Oh, thank you, Canada. So I apologize, United States. That was probably me trying to work in two languages. It was or. And so with Argentina's, it would be and or. And so my understanding of the decision, which I believe has agreement, would read as the Standing Committee shall consider the need for the development of further appropriate mechanisms, including guidance and capacity building on simplified procedures in accordance with the recommendations in Res Conf 12.3 Rev Cop 18 Part XIII to facilitate the efficient international movement of wildlife samples for diagnostic purposes and/or conservation purposes for consideration by the 20th meeting of the Conference of the Parties. It's my sense that the committee is in agreement with proposing that draft decision to the 19th meeting of the Conference of the Parties. Okay, so seeing no objections, I conclude that the Standing Committee agrees to forward the draft decision as I just read it out to the Conference of the Parties for their consideration. And now we can do 40. So we'll turn our attention now to document 40, guidance for making legal acquisition findings, report of the Secretariat. So I will invite the Secretariat to present their document, please.
Thank you very much, Chair, and I'm pleased to introduce my new colleague, Rachel Gogan, that will replace Sophie Flensburg on legal issues. We are going to work together on this, and she will present some documents tomorrow. I'm introducing document 40, which reports on the implementation of decisions 18122 to 18124 on guidelines for making legal acquisition findings. Since the adoption of the resolution Conf 18.7 on legal acquisition findings at the last COP, the Secretariat has worked in close collaboration with the Food and Agriculture Organization, FAO, and other partners in the preparation of materials and the organization of several workshops to build capacity in the making of legal acquisition findings around the world and round the clock. The Secretariat has undertaken an initial revision of the Rapid Guide for making legal acquisition findings. The revised Rapid Guide is designed in a manner that is sufficiently standardized to be applicable by all parties for all transactions. Digital application is also under consideration to further assist interested parties in the automatization of some steps in the process for facilitating the work of the management authorities in the making of the legal acquisition findings. In response to notification to the parties number 2021/60, the United States of America has indicated having assisted developing countries in the improvement of their capacity to verify legal acquisition based on their national identified needs. In addition, Forest Trends and the Center for International Environmental Law, CITES, have developed a legal acquisition finding handbook that I think is available now in the 3 languages of the convention, and they are implementing a pilot program through which they deliver assistance to several parties. The organization of the workshops and other capacity building activities related to the legal acquisition findings are a priority for the Secretariat. And in this sense, the Secretariat is very grateful to the United Kingdom for the provision of funding towards the implementation of the rapid guide for the making of legal acquisition findings and the provisions of the resolution 18.7. The United Kingdom is exploring the possibility of hosting a workshop in the coming month, and the intention is to hold it before COP19. The Secretariat will keep parties informed as these plans develop. In closing, Madam Chair, the Standing Committee is invited to consider the recommendations contained in paragraph 18 of the document. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Secretariat, for your report. And as the Secretariat notes, in particular, the Standing Committee is invited to take note of the present document and to consider submitting the rapid guide for the making of legal acquisition findings and the draft decisions found in paragraph 18B for consideration by the Conference of the Parties. So I will open the floor for comments from members of the Standing Committee. And I will also invite observer parties who might wish to comment on SC 74, Doc 40. Peru, please, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Peru would like to congratulate the Secretariat on the preparation of this document. We believe that it's a very useful guide that would allow us to establish the origin and of the species which are part of an export request. We are fully convinced that this rapid guide will help the administrative authorities in their decision-making, giving them the necessary criteria to make a decision. Because of all of this, we recognize the importance of their implementation of this rapid guide, and we would like to request the support for training and implementation. A good group of species for the exercise of their implementation could be sharks, since they have shown a higher, we have seen a higher demand in fins, and that requires more information. In this sense, we would like to carry out an implementation exercise to be carried out in Peru with the participation of the different members of the region. Thank you.
Thank you, Peru, for your support of the rapid guide for the making of legal acquisition findings and your request for support on implementation and training in your region. United Kingdom, please, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. The UK thanks the Secretariat for this report. We very much welcome this work on legal acquisition findings, which are a key requirement to ensuring international trade in CITES listed species is compliant with the Convention. We're pleased to be providing funding to the Secretariat to help take this work forward, and we'd be keen to work with the Secretariat further on this. We agree that the Standing Committee should submit the rapid guide and draft decisions 19AA to 19CC to the 19th meeting of the Conference of the Parties, with any revisions coming out of the workshop mentioned. Thank you.
Thank you, United Kingdom. United States, please, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. The United States also supports the recommendations in the document, including the draft expanded rapid guide for making legal acquisition findings, and support the process envisioned to consider any needed updates to this guidance through the draft decisions during the next intercessional period. And we thank the Secretariat for putting this forward. Thank you.
Thank you, United States. And Poland, you have the floor.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. We thank the Secretariat for the report and appreciate the proposal by the Secretariat of a user-friendly version of the rapid guide and support the proposal to test and further develop it. At the same time, The draft Rapid Guide document requires an in-depth discussion and modification before it can be endorsed, in our opinion. One important issue to discuss is the definition of legal acquisition finding in Section 1 of the Rapid Guide. In our view, legal acquisition finding needs to be done not only for trade under Article 3 to 5, but also prior to confirming any exemption under Article 7 to CITES, in order for a management authority to be satisfied that a specimen was bred in captivity or is genuinely pre-convention. This is also outlined in Annex 2 of Resolution Conf 18.7, which describes additional circumstances that require the verification of legal acquisition or other legal findings. The proposal to develop an automated approach to risk assessment, draft decision 19.BBA, also needs further clarification. We are not convinced that risk assessment can and should be automated, and are concerned about possibly high cost of developing a central legal acquisition finding database, as indicated in diagram on page 10. It is also unclear what administrative burden it would bring to parties and how it would be linked to a CITES permitting system. The EU would prefer a stepwise approach, focusing on development and testing the Rapid Guide in the first phase, and moving to a possible automated approach at a later stage after COP20, based on more experience with practical application of the Rapid Guide and the risk assessment. The EU would bring its further observations to the working group if one was to be established. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, EU, and thank you as well for your comments on the Rapid Guide for the making of legal acquisition findings and some areas where you think improvement is needed. And I may ask the Secretariat for some clarifications as well, as that might respond to some of your questions. Just give me a moment on that one. I will first see if there's other comments from parties or members of the Standing Committee. Senegal, please.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Senegal, as well, would like to highly congratulate the Secretariat for the preparation of this document and the Rapid Guide. Now, however, on the using of it, we will need training for this. Thank you.
Thank you, Senegal. Thank you, parties. And Poland, apologies. I was just conferring with the Secretariat because I wasn't, I think maybe some clarification on their side on what is intended in 19BBA might be useful. So, Secretariat, please.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to Poland and the EU for the comments. They are all welcome and well taken. The issue of the definition, we had the discussion in Brussels at the meeting hosted by the EU, and I think it's important to distinguish between the LAF and other legal verifications, and all this is a package of exercises. The LAF are for Article 3, 4, 5, but other legal verifications are required for pre-convention and other exemptions in Article 7. On paragraph A, we are referring to a dedicated web page to serve as a clearinghouse for all the models that you utilize as parties to verify legality. It's not a database of something cumbersome or costly for you. And the workshop that we announced may provide opportunities to refine the guidance and incorporate other comments that you may have before we go into the testing phase of the rapid guide. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Secretariat. And so, as mentioned, I understand that the rapid guide may be further revised based on some inputs, and so it can include some of the concerns raised by Poland. I did overall hear support from the other parties who intervened with respect to the rapid guide for the making of legal acquisition findings and the recommended decisions. So it's my sense that the Standing Committee could agree to submit the proposed decisions for consideration by the Conference of the Parties with the rapid guide for the making of legal acquisition findings with with revisions based on the comments we've heard and also the outcomes of the workshop, which should be occurring before the Conference of the Parties. Yeah, but overall, I am hearing some support for advancing this through the Conference of the Parties, and so that is the proposal I have for the Standing Committee to consider. Okay, so I don't see any requests for the floor, so I'm going to. So it's my assessment that the Standing Committee takes note of the present documents and the report of the Secretariat. We take note of the rapid guide for the making of legal acquisition findings. Take note that there is an intention for a workshop to be organized to have a further review of the rapid guide, which could also take into consideration some of the concerns that were raised by Poland, and that the Standing Committee agrees that the draft decisions be advanced to the Conference of the Parties for their consideration, along with the rapid guide for the making of legal acquisition findings with any revisions that result from the work from the workshop. Okay, so I take that as agreed, and that would conclude our discussion on SC 74 Doc 40. So we do have a few more minutes left before I would like to close. I am very cognizant that we will need to close early to avoid any mix-ups with the transport. But I will invite the opening of Doc 14, and if we are able, we hopefully can conclude our consideration of SC 74 Doc 14 on the tree species program. So this document was submitted by the Secretariat, so I would invite the Secretariat to present their document, please. Secretariat, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Chair. It is a real pleasure for me to introduce document SC 74, document 14, on the CITES Tree Species Program, also known as the CTSP. In the document, the Secretariat reports on progress made on each of the 17 projects that are underway or have already been completed under the CTSP by the many implementing partners that are involved in this. Further progress has been made on a number of projects since this document was produced. All final outputs are placed on the CTSP website and we would invite all members of the Standing Committee and other participants to take a look. Materials on the identifications of trees and timber specimens will also be included in the new repository of identification materials that are being developed under the CITES Virtual College. The Secretariat would like to note that the current phase of this CTSP is coming to an end later in this year in November. The CITES Secretariat has initiated consultations with the International Tropical Timber Organization, ITTO, and other potential partners on the continuation of the program beyond this year, and welcome any interest in this discussion by potential donors and beneficiary countries. The Secretariat will report on the implementation of the CTSP to the next meeting of the COP, and also propose some draft decisions for the consideration of the COP. A preliminary draft of these decisions is contained in paragraph 20 of the document. We have one small edit to the draft decision 19BB, where we will spell out the full name of this CITES Tree Species Program, and then add brackets around CTSP. In accordance with decision 18.16, the Standing Committee is invited to provide any guidance and recommendations to the Secretariat for its consideration in preparing its report to COP19, and as well as the decisions. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Secretariat. So the Secretariat provides their report on the CITES Tree Species Program and indicates that they will provide a report to the Conference of the Parties with proposed decisions as found in paragraph 20 of the document, and they invite our guidance and recommendations as they prepare to report to the Conference of the Parties. So I will open the floor to members of the Standing Committee who wish to comment on the recommendations brought forward by the Secretariat. North America, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The North American region supports the continuation of the CITES Tree Species Program and the draft decisions in paragraph 20 of the document. With regard to the two draft decisions included in the document, we support the Secretariat submitting them for consideration of the Conference of the Parties at COP19 with the following amendment to Decision 19BB, paragraph B. Decision 19BB, paragraph small b, should be amended to read B, seek advice and guidance from the plants and standing committees, strike the words where required, and replace with as needed. So that would read seek advice and guidance from the plants and standing committees as needed. We further urge that any capacity building programs on the implementation of CITES for tree species included in the appendices using lessons learned from the CITES Tree Species Program be well integrated into existing ongoing CITES capacity building initiatives. We also suggest that the results of the CITES Tree Species Program midterm review be included in any tree species program document submitted to COP19 for review by the Conference of the Parties. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, North America, for the advice you provide on issues to include in the report to the Secretariat, as well as a proposed amendment to the draft decision 19BB for the Secretariat's consideration. Oceania, please, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Oceania acknowledges the success of the CITES Tree Species Program, in particular the capacity building provided to parties relating to the development of non-detriment findings and the management of timber species subject to the review of significant trade. Oceania would propose an amendment to draft decision 19BB, paragraph little a. We'd imagine it would read, develop and implement a capacity building program, and we would insert across all 6 regions and then carry on from there on the implementation. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Oceania, who provides also another proposed amendment to decision 19BB, subparagraph A. Peru, please, followed by China. Peru, you have the floor.
Thank you. Madam Chair, I have been asked by Nicaragua, who is unable to attend, that they'd like to thank the Secretariat for the support that they have received to make their projects a reality in our countries, because it contributes a great deal to the sustainable management of Dalbergia species in our region, with the technical support for our staff in the institutions and to help in the field with increasing scientific, technical, administrative and legal knowledge in terms of the management and harvesting of Dalbergia. The project helps with legal trade, and it has helped us to strengthen not only controls but also sustainable use and trade in the species in a legal manner through management and forestry management plans, where we've had a great deal of emphasis on the making of NDFs. In the case of Nicaragua, the project is being used to analyze scientific data on the population status of Dalbergia species, which were being carried out through annual monitoring in sampling plots within our forestry service, but we're also working on taxonomic, biological and morphological characteristics, the potential use, and we've been able to carry out projections, and this has been used as contributions for technical report preparation. This project helped us to produce information on the species through exercises and essays, and we have set up sampling areas, and we've been able to ensure the taking of harvest so that we can work for the future of Dalbergia retusa, as well as looking in detail at studies and technical information, which has helped us to improve the ecology and silviculture of the species. Thank you.
Thank you, Peru. I see a request from the floor from China. So China, please, you have the floor.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Madam Chair. China would like to repeat its support for the CITES tree species program, and we congratulate them on the good implementation and the results already achieved, but we'd like to draw attention to an area of the development of this program. We'd be delighted to take part insofar as we're possible within the framework of the development of this program. Thank you.
Thank you, China, and I see the Secretariat's taking good note of that. I don't see any further requests from members of the Standing Committee, so I will now begin to open the floor to parties. I see Kenya followed by Brazil. Kenya, Brazil, and then United States. Kenya, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Kenya appreciates the reporting by the Secretariat in this document, reporting on the progress in implementation of the decisions 1814 to 1816 on the CITES tree species program. Madam Chair, Kenya, together with Tanzania and Uganda, are beneficiaries of this program, and it is evident from the reporting from the Secretariat that there is this program as enhanced capacity building not only in the region, in Africa, but also in all the regions of CITES. And it is the recommendation, Kenya supports the recommendations put forward by the Secretariat and the amendments that have been proposed by Oceania, North America, and the previous speakers. That we agree that this program should be continued. And therefore, Madam Chair, we support these recommendations and seek to see the program continue so that this capacity continues to be built in the interest of the conservation and management of the tree species listed under CITES. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kenya. Next was Brazil, followed by the United States. Brazil, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Although we understood that a resolution earlier on CITES and forests needed to be better discussed, we would like to thank ITTO for their partnership on the development of a near-infrared spectrometer portable equipment for the identification of Brazilian tree species and its products, alongside with our Brazilian Forest Service. Therefore, we strongly support the recommendations of paragraph 20 of the document. Thank you.
Thank you, Brazil. Next, I had the United States, and followed by Indonesia. United States, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We also would like to share our appreciation to the CITES Secretariat for its continued work on the CITES Tree Species Program. With regard to support for CITES implementation for listed tree species, the United States highly values the continued collaboration between ITTO and CITES for the critical expertise ITTO provides on trade in tropical tree species, as well as other members of the Collaborative Partnership on Forests, to strengthen the support to parties for implementing the Convention for Listed Tree Species. We note that the United States will continue to pledge its support through ITTO for CITES ITTO cooperation on CITES listed tree species. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, United States. I will give the last party word to Indonesia, and then the European Union, and then I will see if there's one or two observers, and then I will close so that everyone can assure themselves of public transport. So Indonesia, please, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Indonesia wishes to thank the European Union and CITES Secretariat for the kind support for carrying out this project on the non-detriment finding report and a DNA database for Dalbergia latifolia in Java and West Nusa Tenggara, Indonesia. We are also grateful that the CTSP Regional Coordinator for Asia for his kind assistance during the implementation of the project. The CTSP Indonesia has implemented its activity for almost 24 months. Though with all the limitations that exist due to the global COVID-19 pandemic, we are trying our best to complete the activities that we have planned with various adjustments, while still prioritizing the safety of personnel, especially in carrying out our field activities. We hope that at the end of the CTSP activity, Indonesia can contribute to the sustainable trade and management of Dalbergia latifolia for the benefit of humankind. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Indonesia. I have the European Union. European Union, please.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you to the Secretariat for the report. We certainly stress the importance of continuing the support to the implementation of the Convention for CITES listed tree species. We regret that the Standing Committee did not see the urgency of moving forward already at this next COP this year on a resolution on CITES and forests. We thought that this would have been an opportunity also to highlight the importance that CITES plays in the sustainable management and of forests and important tree species. And that would have been supporting, certainly helping the continuation of important programs like this one. But we certainly support the continuation, and we attach a lot of importance to this project and its continuation. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, European Union. So before I conclude, I will see if there's one or two short interventions from observers. I see one, so I will invite, two, okay. So I will invite ITTO followed by SSN, and then I will conclude.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It'll be really brief. So ITTO has been assisting the CITES Secretariat in its implementation of the program since its inception, including developing the program proposal and identification of the regional coordinators for overseeing the program activities, review of the proposals submitted to the program for the funding, convening the regional workshops, and facilitating meetings of the program advisory committee. ITTO values the strong collaboration relationship developed with the CITES over the 15 years. And we look forward to increasing the collaboration to ensure that the existing and new listing of the tropical tree species are effectively implemented. Thank you.
Thank you, ITTO. And we'll take the last intervention from SSN, please.
Muchísimas gracias, Presidenta.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I'm not going to repeat all the good words I've been hearing from all those who have spoken already. We agree 100% with that. This program has been a program that has been executed in an exemplary and impeccable manner with absolutely brilliant results. SSN would like to congratulate all those who have participated, all the countries that have benefited also from this program, and we invite donors to keep collaborating with this very significant program, because trees are the elephants of the world of plants. Thank you.
Thank you, SSN. So we have heard lots of good support for the CITES tree species program. The Standing Committee therefore takes note of the report of the Secretariat, and we also invite the Secretariat to take on the advice provided by the Standing Committee, including the amendments proposed to the Decision 19BB in the preparation of their report. And I will turn to the Secretariat to see if you have any final points to make in response before we conclude.
Thank you very much. Of course, in my effort of being as brief as possible, I omitted the thanks to the donor, which is the European Union, which has made this whole CTSP project possible, and also the thanks to the ITTO, which I should also have mentioned initially. We will take these comments into consideration as we report to the COP. There's one comment made by Canada, which was also to report on the midterm review, which will not be possible because this will only be completed at around the time of the COP or right after, because we have decided to do one evaluation rather than two of this program. So there will be an evaluation at the end of the program to look at the effectiveness, etc., the impact, etc., that we would do as normal evaluation. So just to clarify this, but for the rest, we're more than happy to take on board the advice and the recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretariat. And so with that, we conclude our discussions on SC 74, Doc 14. And I will end our session for today at this point, again, so everyone can catch their buses and their trains. A couple quick points I'd like you to take into account for tomorrow. There are a number of executive summaries now available on the website. So tomorrow, first thing, before we return to the agenda, I will take up executive 4, 5, 6, and hopefully 7, if it's been posted. And then we will return and try to complete our agenda, mindful, of course, that we are also expecting to return to some items that were in working group, drafting group, or in ComDocs. In that regard, I would invite you to look at the website. As I understand, the Big Cats Task Force drafting group has prepared the ComDoc, which brings together all the recommended amendments that were raised on the floor. So thank you very much. Have a good evening. Enjoy the extra time, and we will see you all tomorrow at 9 a.m. unless there's other announcements. Okay. See you tomorrow then. Have a good evening. Thank you.